Hello, everyone. Kathy's lawyer rose to his feet, his tone composed and polished. Your Honor, my client respectfully requests a counseling session as an effort to repair the marriage. She firmly believes that, with the right guidance, this relationship can be salvaged. Before he even finished, my lawyer was already on his feet, speaking with confidence and authority. Your Honor, Mr. Porter has made his position crystal clear. He has no desire for reconciliation. The facts speak volumes. Mrs. Porter has been involved in several extramarital affairs and is currently pregnant by one of these individuals. My client's intention is to proceed with the divorce. The courtroom buzzed with quiet whispers, a low hum that mirrored the disbelief churning inside me. I tightened my fists and forced my face to remain neutral. I couldn't afford to show weakness now. Kathy's lawyer pressed on, but the strain in his voice betrayed his struggle. While my client admits to her past actions, she believes that counseling could provide closure and perhaps repair some of the damage. A wave of frustration rose in me. I leaned forward, keeping my tone measured but firm. Your Honor, I appreciate the court's time, but I have no interest in counseling. Too much damage has been done, and this marriage cannot be fixed. I just want the divorce finalized. Kathy's lawyer shuffled his papers before turning to the judge once more. Your Honor, aside from the marriage itself, there is also the matter of the unborn child's well-being. My client feels strongly that counseling is essential to ensure stability and support for all involved, especially the child. My lawyer remained composed, but I could sense he was waiting for my lead. The frustration I'd been holding back boiled over, and I stood abruptly, the words spilling out before I could catch them. I'm not interested in raising that kid. It isn't mine. Let that cheating 304 and the real father deal with it. I'm done, and I'm not sitting through counseling with her. The judge's voice cut through the room like a whip. Mr. Porter, one more outburst, and I will hold you in contempt of court. Gasps rippled across the courtroom, and I caught a glimpse of Kathy's face, pale and rigid. The judge adjusted his glasses, his sharp gaze pinning me to the spot. After a long pause, he spoke with measured authority. Mr. Porter, while I understand your frustration, this court has a duty to consider the emotional welfare of all parties involved. I am ordering both of you to attend counseling sessions as a final attempt to address these issues productively. I clenched my jaw and scowled. I won't attend. The judge's voice hardened. You will attend. 1 month, 2 sessions per week. Noncompliance will not be tolerated. He banged his gavel, signaling the end of the hearing. A week later, I found myself in the counseling office, the air thick with tension and unspoken resentment. The counselor, a calm-looking man with wire-framed glasses perched on his nose, sat behind a desk with nothing but a legal pad and a framed photo of a woman and a young child. Kathy sat beside me, fidgeting with the edge of her sweater. Brian, she began hesitantly, her voice shaking. I just want to say. Don't. I cut her off sharply, my tone ice cold. Keep your mouth shut. I don't want to hear it. The counselor, Mr. Jordan, looked up from his notepad, his expression unreadable. Brian, I understand this is difficult, but the purpose of this session is to open a dialogue. Even if it's uncomfortable, talking is the first step toward resolution. Can you try? I crossed my arms and set my jaw. I'm only here because the judge ordered it. I'll show up, but I don't have to participate. Jordan sighed and jotted something down. I understand this is painful, but communication, even strained, can lead to understanding. The hour dragged on until it finally ended. As we stood to leave, the counselor announced, I'm canceling these sessions and will report to the judge that they're unproductive. Fine by me, I thought as I walked out. At the next court date, the judge wasn't amused. Give me one reason why I shouldn't hold your client in contempt, he snapped at my lawyer. My client complied with the order, Your Honor. He attended the session. The counselor himself canceled the remainder of the sessions. As noted in his report, my lawyer replied evenly. The judge glared at me. I ordered participation, not just attendance. For more weeks of counseling. You will participate, Mr. Porter. Back in the counselor's office, the setup was exactly the same. 2 chairs facing the desk, the same photo on display. As I adjusted my chair, Kathy's hand darted out to stop me. "If you touch me, I'll call it assault," she hissed. "And don't think I won't knock your teeth out." I stared her down and resumed moving my chair. Settling into my seat, I pulled out my phone. "Mr. Porter, the court ordered participation," the counselor reminded me. "I know," I replied evenly. "I'm recording the session. My lawyer warned me that some counselors might be biased, and since Kathy's been seeing you for a while, I'm not taking any chances." The counselor tilted his head. "And if I refuse to let you record? Then I'll request a different counselor." I shot back. "I'm only here to get this over with. I want this 304 out of my life." Kathy crossed her arms, looking bored. "Whatever," she muttered, waving dismissively. "Can we just start?" I said, my voice cutting through the tension in the room. The air seemed to shift, an uneasy truce settling over us. "All right then," Mr. Jordan replied, clasping his hands together on his desk. "Before we begin, can I ask a question first?" I interrupted, my tone sharp and frosty. He nodded, his expression calm. "Of course. You're welcome to ask questions at any time. There may be moments when I'll ask you to hold off, but for now, go ahead." His small, practiced smile did nothing to thaw my mood. I leaned forward slightly. "Have you slept with her yet?" Kathy gasped audibly, the sound slicing through the room. Mr. Jordan's face, however, remained composed. "No, Brian," he said evenly. "I have not, and I will not, have any kind of sexual relationship with Kathy. Not only would it be grossly inappropriate, but I'm also very happily married. Does that address your concern?" I studied him for a long moment before giving a curt nod. As much as I hated to admit it, I believed him, though my trust in Kathy had long since evaporated after the parade of men she'd entertained over the past year. "Good," he continued smoothly. "Now, as I was saying, I'd like to start by setting some expectations. Since I've had prior sessions with Kathy, I'd like her to outline what she hopes to achieve here. After that, Brian, I'll ask for your goals as well. Please refrain from interrupting while she speaks." I leaned back, folding my arms across my chest. "Fine. Go ahead, Kathy," I muttered, the words dripping with sarcasm. Kathy shifted uncomfortably in her seat, wringing her hands. She began hesitantly, her voice trembling. "I want Brian to know how sorry I am. I know I've hurt him terribly, but it wasn't because I didn't love him. I did. I still do. He worked so much, was gone on all those business trips, and I felt lonely. I made terrible mistakes, and I'll regret them for the rest of my life. If I could go back and undo it all, I would. I just want us to try again. I want us to be a family and raise this baby together, maybe even have more children someday. I know I can be the wife he deserves if he'd only give me a chance." Her voice cracked, and she looked at me, tears glistening in her eyes. Mr. Jordan nodded encouragingly. "Thank you for sharing, Kathy. Now, Brian, it's your turn." I smirked coldly. "She can write all those feelings down on paper, roll it up, and shove it where the sun doesn't shine. Her feelings mean nothing to me. She's already dead to me." Kathy's face crumpled, and she bolted from the room, sobbing. As the door slammed behind her, I muttered under my breath, "Maybe she'll run into traffic." "That was unnecessary," Mr. Jordan said firmly, his voice tinged with disappointment. "I don't care," I shot back. "She's a lying, cheating tramp who's been screwing half the town, got herself pregnant, and had the audacity to try and pin it on me. If I hadn't demanded a DNA test, I'd be stuck raising someone else's kid right now. Tell me, doctor, how exactly am I supposed to act?" "It's natural to feel angry, Brian," he replied, maintaining his calm demeanor. "But anger can blind you to the good that was once there. It might help to." I cut him off, my voice rising. "Don't you dare sit there and tell me to remember the good. Do you even understand what I've been through? Have you ever given your entire heart to someone, only to have them crush it so completely that you question your own sanity? She didn't just betray me. She destroyed everything we built together. And she hasn't even once truly apologized. Not for screwing around, not for the lies, not for getting pregnant by some random guy. All she cares about is saving her own skin. So don't lecture me about moving past my anger. It's the only thing keeping me going right now." I just want this cheating 304 out of my life so I can start picking up the pieces. I stood abruptly, glaring down at him. Does that count as participation? I snapped before storming out. The following week, Mr. Jordan greeted me alone in his office. I've asked Kathy to skip today's session, he said. I thought a one-on-one discussion might be more productive. As long as it still counts toward the court order, I replied, dropping into the chair and tossing a thick envelope onto my lap. Let's try to keep this civil, Brian. Name-calling doesn't help. I'm not here to be civil, I retorted. I'm here because I have to be. That woman is doing everything she can to drag this out. She doesn't want the divorce because the prenup leaves her with nothing. So she's trying to guilt me into taking her back. It's not going to happen. And the child, he pressed gently, do you not feel any responsibility for his welfare? I scoffed. I don't care about that kid. By your logic, should I adopt every child whose mother couldn't keep her legs closed? It's not my problem. Mr. Jordan leaned forward slightly. Brian, the depth of your anger suggests there's still something unresolved. The kind of love you had doesn't just disappear overnight. Once the anger subsides, and it will, you might find there's still a foundation to rebuild. I narrowed my eyes. Not a chance, I snarled. Let's finish this farce so I can be done with her for good. That infuriating smile crept back onto his face, and I had to fight the urge to deck him right then and there. If he wanted to play smug, I'd show him how it felt to be on the receiving end. My gaze shifted to the framed photo on his desk. You've got a lovely family, I said, my tone deceptively casual. How long have you been married? We're not here to discuss my personal life, he replied, his smile faltering for a moment. 11 years, if my research is right, I continued, ignoring his protest. Childhood sweetheart, tied the knot right after college, waited a few years to have kids, and then little Aaron came along. He's what, 9 now? That picture looks like it was taken a couple of years back. His composed demeanor cracked as his face paled. How did you? But did you know? I cut him off, leaning forward, that your precious Jennifer has some secrets of her own? When she says she's at Pilates class on Wednesdays while you're stuck here, she's actually at the motel on Patterson, with her personal trainer. That's absurd, he stammered, his voice shaking slightly, but the color had drained from his face. Is it? I said, sliding a set of photos from my envelope and laying them out on his desk. They showed a pretty, slender woman walking into a motel with a young, muscular man. His arm was wrapped around her waist, and the two looked far too cozy to be anything but lovers. I wasn't done. I pulled out a DVD and placed it on the desk. There's footage, too, if you want to see exactly what they were up to. Fair warning, though, it's explicit. I made the mistake of watching it when I got my PI report. Those images are burned into my brain forever. He sat frozen, staring at the photos like they might suddenly leap off the desk and attack him. And one more thing, I said, pulling out a folded document. No, he whispered, his voice trembling. Please, God, no. I opened the paper and tapped it. Turns out, your personal trainer isn't the first. He's too young to be Aaron's dad. But whoever the father is, it sure as hell isn't you. He shot up from his chair and bolted for what I guessed was a bathroom attached to his office. The sound of violent retching came through the door. When he finally returned, his face was pale, his eyes rimmed with red, and tears streamed freely down his cheeks. Now you understand, I said, my voice steady. Do you feel the pain she's caused me? Do you see why I need her out of my life? He looked at me, utterly defeated, and gave a small nod. Good, I said, a smirk tugging at the corner of my lips. But there's one more thing you should know. His face turned ghostly white. There's more, he croaked. It's all fake, I said flatly. None of it is real. As far as I know, your wife is as loving and faithful as you've always believed, and Aaron is definitely your son. He blinked at me, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. But the photos? Photoshop, I replied, pulling out the original images I'd manipulated. A little time, some Facebook posts, and voila. Anyone with half a brain could tell you they're doctored. And the DVD? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Blank, I said with a shrug. The DNA report? That's actually the paternity test for Kathy's bastard child. I just swapped the names and dates. His expression shifted from confusion to devastation, fresh tears rolling down his face. Why? He choked out. Why would you do this? What could you possibly gain from destroying my marriage and my life? I didn't want to destroy anything, I said firmly. That's why I told you it was fake. I needed you to feel, even for a moment, what I've been living with every single day. The betrayal, the anger, the loss. It consumes you. And being forced to sit in these sessions, listening to that woman prattle on about how much she loves me, makes it all worse. I just want to move on, to rebuild the life she shattered. But the courts won't let me. So I made sure you understood. I gathered the fake documents, sliding them back into the envelope. You can destroy these, I said softly. I'm sorry I had to do this, but it was the only way to make you see. At the next court hearing, my lawyer stood before the judge with the report from the counseling sessions. Your Honor, I have the counselor's findings, he said, his tone both formal and pressing. I've read it, the judge said gruffly, flipping through the pages. The counselor states that, even after only 3 out of the mandated 8 sessions, it's clear this marriage cannot be salvaged. For the well-being of all involved, especially the child, dissolution is the best course. Yes, Your Honor, my lawyer replied. We request that the divorce be granted per the original petition. The judge's eyes landed on me, sharp and assessing. I kept my gaze steady, staring straight ahead. After a moment of silence, he spoke. So ordered. He banged his gavel, the sound ringing out like a bell signaling my freedom. He glanced at the financial records on his desk. There will be no alimony, he declared, his tone brooking no argument. The judge's decision was final. Miss Kathy earned more than I did, so neither of us would owe alimony. Both of us would keep the assets we brought into the marriage, while everything else would be split evenly. For me, the no alimony ruling was the real victory. It meant I wouldn't be financially chained to her anymore. Kathy, on the other hand, had hit rock bottom. She'd lost her job, though that didn't shock me one bit. Apparently, one of her many lovers had been a client, and that kind of scandal rarely ends well. I couldn't help but smirk at the poetic irony of it all. Then, as if her circus of drama wasn't already enough, I heard through the grapevine that she'd filed lawsuits against 7 men, demanding court-ordered DNA tests to determine the father of her child. 7 men. I shook my head in disbelief. She was dragging them all through the mud just to figure out whose baby she was carrying. The fallout was spectacular. Once the results came out, it sparked a chain reaction no one could have seen coming. News of the paternity mess spread like wildfire, and every single one of those 7 men's wives filed for divorce. I'll admit, I felt a grim satisfaction watching the chaos Kathy had unleashed. She wasn't just wrecking her life anymore. She was pulling others down with her, like some karmic hurricane. One story stood out. One of the furious wives stormed into the courthouse and attacked Kathy, breaking her nose in the process. When I heard about it, I couldn't help but laugh. There was something almost poetic about Kathy, the woman who had turned my life upside down, getting a literal punch from the universe. Her bloodied, bruised face felt like the closest thing to cosmic justice I'd ever seen. She eventually gave birth to her child, but nothing about that changed how I felt. The legal cases involving those 7 men dragged on endlessly, though I was just relieved to be far removed from the mess. Then, out of nowhere, Kathy showed up at my house one afternoon. No call, no warning, just her, standing on my doorstep with a look that was equal parts desperation and entitlement. From the second she walked through the door, I knew her mission: to convince me to take her back. She launched into a monologue about how she'd changed, how she'd learned from her mistakes, and how much she still loved me. The sheer audacity of it almost made me laugh. After everything, she still thought she could manipulate me. I stood firm, refusing to let her guilt trip me. Kathy, it's over. We're done. You made your choices, and now you have to live with them, I told her, keeping my tone as calm as possible. But she wouldn't let it go. Her voice grew louder and more frantic, trying every angle to make me feel like the bad guy for refusing to reconcile. Then Karen, my girlfriend, walked into the room. She must have sensed the tension because she didn't hesitate. You need to leave. You're not welcome here, Karen said, her voice sharp and unwavering. Kathy's reaction was explosive. She spewed insults at Karen, throwing venomous jabs, clearly trying to intimidate her. But Karen didn't flinch. I could see her eyes narrow, her resolve solidifying as Kathy's tirade continued. And then Kathy made her fatal mistake. In a fit of rage, she lunged at Karen, trying to hit her. Karen, however, wasn't the type to back down. She dodged Kathy's wild swing with ease and countered swiftly, knocking her off balance and sending her sprawling to the floor. In a blur, Karen had Kathy pinned, her anger radiating in every move. It was surreal to watch. Kathy, the woman who had once controlled so much of my life, was now utterly powerless. "Get the hell out of our lives, Kathy. You're not welcome here," Karen shouted, her voice filled with righteous fury. While they struggled, I pulled out my phone and called the cops. Kathy was screaming by this point, but no one was listening to her anymore. When the officers arrived, Karen calmly explained the situation. Kathy, of course, tried to play the victim, spinning her own version of events. But it didn't take long for the cops to see through her act. As they cuffed her and led her away, I felt a strange mixture of emotions: relief, satisfaction, and an overwhelming sense of closure. It was like the final piece of her toxic presence was being removed from my life. I turned to Karen, who was still buzzing with adrenaline. "You were incredible," I said, a genuine smile spreading across my face. "Just doing what needed to be done," she replied, her expression softening. In that moment, I knew I'd made the right choice. The nightmare of my past was finally over, and I could see a future with someone who truly valued and respected me. Karen wasn't just someone I loved. She was my partner, my equal, and a woman who had my back no matter what. With her, I knew I could finally leave the wreckage behind and start building something real. Subscribe so you don't miss new stories on the channel. Bye.